Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good morning, everyone. It's a rainy, fine morning. It's not fine. I don't like the rain, but we need it. Okay, so we are continuing on the Five Jhana Factors. Today we will cover the last of the factors, one pointiness, ekagata. That will leave us, since we have 2 more classes next month, right? Yes. 2 more classes that we will use to review the 5 factors over again in preparation for our retreat on December 9th. So if you're interested in joining that retreat, the registration is up and running on our website. It is a full day retreat, so it'll be a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Promise you, it's not that bad. So, the jhana factors. The jhana factors are what is needed to go into a state of mind called access concentration. So, the list will show 3 types of concentrations. There's momentary, access, and absorption. Momentary concentration is the meditation that you would typically go into when you're having a short sit period. Anything under 30 minutes would be considered a short sit. And so, because it's such a short amount of time, we don't have enough time to really develop and maintain strong enough concentration. So it's momentary concentration. Where the concentration, where the focus, the awareness of your object of meditation is very momentary. It comes and goes. You're constantly distracted and you have to refocus and realign your object of meditation over and over again. But once that subdues, and if you're sitting for longer than 30 minutes, then we enter a mindset called access concentration. And access concentration is the sweet spot in our meditation practice. It is where you want to be. This is where you want to achieve correct meditation. But to get into the consciousness level of access concentration, we have to develop the 5 factors. And it's only via the 5 factors that we can truly be in the state of real meditation. And then once you kind of surpass that, then we go into the higher states of meditation or consciousness called jhana. And jhana is the more advanced levels of meditation, which we will never get into because it requires a minimum of a 3-month retreat, which I doubt anybody has time for. So, in lieu of that, we're going to focus on access concentration. So just to quickly go over the factors again. So we have applied and sustained attention. Applied attention is just essentially when we're first sitting down, right, and when we're focusing on our object of meditation. Well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. Our object of meditation, when we're meditating, for now at least, right, we're using a practice called anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing. Anapana means in-out breathing, and sati means mindfulness. So it's a mindfulness of breathing. And so we use the mindfulness of breathing as our object of meditation. More specifically, we're using the anapana spot. It's called the anapana spot, which is the spot between your upper lip and your nostrils. This little area here is called anapana, the anapana spot. So this is going to be your object of meditation while we're trying to focus on the factors. And what we're trying to achieve here is just being aware of our breathing at the anapana spot, right? In other practices, when you're counting your breath or you're following your breath, right? You're following the movement of breathing if you're following the breath, right? And you're being aware, you're focusing on how the breathing enters your body and exits, etc., etc. But the anapana spot, you're not following the breath. You're simply just being aware of the breathing in the spot, right? Depending on the weather, you may not even be able to feel any breathing, right? If that's the case, that's perfectly fine. It's not about feeling the breath, but being aware that that breath is happening in this little spot, right? And so you're maintaining your object of meditation at this Anapana spot. So that's applied attention. So as you're meditating and you're focusing on the Anapana spot, and you're continuing to hold your concentration, applied attention is if you got distracted, or if something arose that distracted you, feelings, sounds, emotions, whatever it may be, you're simply being aware of that happening, and you're simply just applying back attention to your object of meditation, right? So you're constantly applying attention back to it. You're constantly getting distracted, you push it away. Another distraction comes, you push it away, right? You're just constantly reapplying attention. And then you get to sustain attention, or concentration, where you're able to sustain and maintain that concentration for a longer period of time, right? At the very minimum, if you are trying to have or maintain a dedicated disciplined practice of meditation, the very minimum amount that you should be able to sit is 30 minutes. The very minimum. Longer would be much preferred, but 30 minutes is the minimum. Because a lot of times it takes about 10-ish minutes just to have the mind and body kind of balance out and to kind of sync up, right? Because if you, depending on the time of day also that you meditate, right? The best time of day is early in the morning. It's fresh, you haven't done anything yet, nothing has happened, you don't have too many things going on in your mind. Whereas if you meditate at the end of the day, what can typically happen is the moment you sit down for the next 5-10 minutes, the thoughts of the day arises, right? What happened during the day? What regrets do you have? What things you wish you could have said or done differently? The whole day, just kind of, you have like this little reel in your mind about the whole day, right? And so you have a lot of more opportunity for distractions to arise. So because of that, it may take you longer to really settle into your session. And so experiment with that as well. Experiment with the different times of days of meditation. What works for you best? What's easier? Where do you feel more concentrated, more comfortable, right? And so as you sit for longer periods and you're able to sustain or maintain that concentration for a few minutes, 5, 10, 15 plus minutes, then you're in where you need to be, right? And then the good stuff happens. And then if you're able to maintain or sustain your concentration or your object of meditation for, at this point, a minimum of 30 minutes, then piti might start arise, or joy. This is also translated as happiness or euphoria, or this kind of feeling of ecstasy. And what happens here is piti, or joy, is a pleasurable feeling in the body that arises. And this pleasurable feeling does not have any cause, right? Most of the times when we experience pleasurable feelings, it's because of something else happening, right? We're enjoying food, or we're enjoying music, or TV, or whatever it is, right? Externalities that provide us pleasure. The pleasure here is pleasure that arises in the body without any cause. Your body, somewhere in your body, just feels really good. It feels very comfortable, feels very serene, very light. And so it may start very faintly, for me at least. The area that first arises, where piti first arises, is in the hands. So as I'm sitting in meditation, my hands feel just very comfortable, very light, as if sometimes they don't even feel like I have hands at all, or my hands are like over here, or doing this, right? They're all over the place. Like you don't feel the hands, the sensations of your hands. And this is that pleasurable feeling. But it can arise anywhere else in the body. It can arise in the head, in your heart, chest area. If you're using like metta or loving kindness meditation as your object of meditation. So just be aware of this very subtle, pleasurable feeling in the body. But when you're able to find it, and if it arises, what often happens is this excites people. And of course, when something exciting happens to you, you want to give it all your attention, right? You want to see what's going on, how it's happening, what's happening, what is it for? But as soon as you do that, if you find that pleasurable feeling somewhere in the body, don't bear it any attention just yet. Be aware that it's there, but don't give it any attention, because as soon as you give it attention, it's going to disappear, because it's not strong enough. And so if you see or if you sense this pleasurable feelings happening somewhere in your body, simply just be aware of it. Don't give it any attention. Maintain your attention at your object of meditation, the Anapanasati. The only time when you can and will need to move your attention is when that piti is very strong. Sometimes it's extremely overwhelming, right? Because it's this kind of pleasurable energy that just expands and it grows, it may even cause restlessness, right? And so as it expands and kind of becomes overwhelming, it'll eventually reach its peak and kind of dive off and then turn into sukha, or bliss. But again, you don't want to shift your attention to that until it's near its peak, where it's very strong. Then you can shift your attention from the object of meditation, from the piti anapana spot to the piti sensation. And then once it reaches that peak, right? And I give the example that when you feel that pleasurable sensation, it may start in one area of the body and kind of expand to your whole body. But just have a subtle awareness of if and when it happens. Because once it gets very strong, right, and I'm sure we've heard stories of, meditation masters or yogis kind of levitating. Well, this is not actual levitation, but when you're in such a strong piti, when you're having an extremely strong piti and your whole body feels pleasurable, right? And it feels kind of almost like it's buzzing, right? Because you have this very strong piti energy. It feels like you're levitating, right? Which is why I said, when I'm sitting, my hands, I don't feel the sensation in my hands anymore, as if my hands got chopped off, right? But that same feeling can expand to your whole body, where you can't even feel, can't sense anything. But once that peaks and it kind of drops off and it turns into bliss or sukha, this is also a pleasurable feeling, but now that pleasurable feeling is in the mind, right? Now your mind is simply at ease, it's restful, it's content, there's no disturbances, right? Because what will happen is the hindrances arise, right? The hindrances are in the black. So sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and doubt. These are the hindrances that will arise when you're meditating. And anything that arises, whatever type of distraction it is, whatever feeling or emotion, anything that arises will fall into one of the 5 categories of the hindrances. But the factors are the antidotes to those specific types of hindrances. So the one good thing about this is if you're able to get through the list at least, or at least get to the majority of it, if a hindrance arises, right, you may be able to figure out what level of factor that you're at, right? Or knowing what factor you can apply to that hindrance in order to eradicate it. And the hindrances here don't get completely eradicated. They don't totally disappear when we're practicing the jhana factors, or even if you're in jhana, the highest level of meditation. The factors may not ever eradicate altogether, but they'll be suspended. They'll be muted until you're able to get out of the practice or get out of the session. But you can at least be aware that when they arise, to recognize what type of hindrance it is, and then you can apply the applicable antidote, whichever factor it is. But anyway, back to joy. So joy, or is it joy? Bliss, sorry. Sukha is, again, it's a mind, it is a pleasurable feeling in the mind. So the mind is content, right? Because at this point, we should be focused enough where we have very little distraction arising. Or if we do have distractions, they are not strong enough to take over our object of meditation, right? They're small and they're wispy, they're kind of just in the background. But they're not strong enough where it takes over and overrides your object of meditation, your anapanasati. And once you get past that, the final factor is one-pointedness, or ekagata. This is the summation of the first four factors. So at this point, the mind is extremely calm, it's content, it is has zero, well not zero, will have very little to no distraction, right? And again, if there's distraction, it's in the background, it doesn't take over, it doesn't override, it doesn't ruin the session, etc., etc. But this is where you are aligned, your mind and body is aligned with the anapanasati. Nothing outside of that arises. Nothing outside of that happens. There's no moving around in the mind, right? The mind is very subtle. And the only thing that you're able to concentrate on is the anapanasati. And if you're able to maintain that for the full duration of your meditation, again, minimum 30 minutes, then you can say that you're in ekagata. You're in one-pointedness. You have one-pointedness concentration. And it's at this one-pointedness concentration, once we have achieved that, and you've achieved the remaining of the factors, because if you've achieved one-pointedness and the other factors, then we can say that we're now in access concentration. Access concentration is the thing that we want to be in. It is the correct meditation. And at this point, if you're able to stay and maintain in access concentration, another good sign of being in access concentration is a phenomenon called nimitta. Nimitta is a light that kind of appears in our mind's eye, right? And this may take some time for it to develop because we have to really be in access concentration for quite some time for it to develop. But it is something that has to develop before you can proceed any further. But nimitta is this kind of light that emerges in the mind's eye. And it'll always start out as something faint and dim and kind of blurry and like oddly shaped and brightness and whatnot. It can appear in different colors and sizes, but that doesn't matter. The point is when it arises, just like when we're in piti and you notice a pleasurable feeling arising in the body, you're not shifting your attention to it just yet. You're just being aware that it's there. Let it grow. And you'll know that it's at its peak or at its strongest is when the brightness gets so bright that it takes over the entire field of view in your mind. Right? So like all you see is whatever color that light is. Typically, it's usually white or off-white, apparently, whatever that means. But that's the kind of progression we want to see in our practice. As you go down the list, notice the sensation in the body, pleasurable feelings in the body, the piti. Then it'll go to the mind for sukha, and then it'll develop into the nimitta, the light. And it's kind of going to be, I wouldn't say our goal, but kind of like the highlight topic for our retreat is achieving this full access concentration. And since we'll have the full day of meditation, hopefully it's achievable. And just like in any other method of meditation that we use, of course you can use any other method of meditation you want to use that's outside of the anapanasati or anapanasati. However, anapanasati, or the using the anapanasati, is the most traditional and the, I wouldn't say easiest or quickest way, but it's a method where it's easily observable in its progression, versus if we use like visualization meditation or chanting meditation or a mantra, right? There's too much. There's too much things happening outside of the breathing that we may not be able to notice or to be aware of the subtleties of our progression. Whereas if you're just focusing on the breath, because the breath is the only thing that you can carry with you anywhere you go, right? And it's the most natural thing that happens to us, that you can use the breath to, or you use the breath as the main object of meditation. There's an analogy that on the hindrances. So we often think that the hindrances only arise in meditation, right? Sensual desire, ill will, sloth, and torpor, restlessness, and doubt. These are, even though they are technically hindrances that arise most commonly in meditation, but they are still hindrances in our everyday life, right? But we don't necessarily notice them because we're not meditating all day. But we do experience the hindrances throughout the day. And so the hindrances throughout the day is like if we were driving down like the hill country, right? And there was a rock in the road, right? We can either drive around it or drive over and continue on, right? We know it's there. We don't really pay too much attention to it, and it's just kind of doing its thing. Whereas when we're sitting in meditation and the hindrances arise, it's as if we were going down a steep hill on like ice skates, right? And if you hit that rock, that little rock, it may feel like you've hit a boulder because of, how fast you're going, how steep the road is. And so when we experience hindrances in meditation, it's a hard smack in the face. Versus if we experience the hindrances in everyday life, we're like, okay, whatever, that happened, or this happened, right? Or you don't really care. And so oftentimes I hear, students say that it's difficult for them to maintain their meditation or the object of meditation because the hindrances keep arising so much and they don't know why it's arising only in meditation. But unfortunately, the hindrances don't arise only in meditation. They arise in everyday life, but we don't really pay too much attention to them, right? We're only paying attention to them because we're in meditation. We have nothing else to pay attention to except our breath. Versus when you're outside, you're working, you're at school, you're taking care of your family, you're doing this, you're doing that. You have so many distractions happening that when the hindrances arise, it's just another obstacle, right? You don't really pay too much attention to it. But in meditation, when the hindrances arise, it's like a smack in the face, right? Because you're not doing anything else except breathing. And so when a hindrance arises, it's like the biggest slap. It's very noticeable. So don't get too discouraged. That's one thing that people always say is like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. You are. It's just you're paying more attention to it now than you would when you're not meditating. So it's more difficult to say that this is correct or this is incorrect. But anyway, point is when a hindrance arises, just be aware of it. We don't want to give it any attention. We don't want to give it any awareness. You don't want to judge it either, right? If a hindrance arises, or any other distraction arises, especially if it's something that continuously comes up, you don't want to judge it. Don't analyze it, don't look into it, don't dissect it, don't do anything. Just be aware that it's there and continue on, right? Because again, our mind, when we're trying to meditate, what are we trying to do? We're trying to be in the present moment, right? We're trying to be the here and the now. But our mind doesn't want that. Your mind is obsessed with time. It's obsessed with the past and obsessed with the future, right? Because those are the two things that it has full control over. And so when we sit in meditation trying to be in the present moment, and the mind's like, I don't like that. Let's think about the argument we had with our significant other 3 weeks ago. Let's think about the vacation we want to take in 2030, right? It's trying to think of over here and trying to think over there because it doesn't like being in the present moment, because it has no control over the present moment. And so it's always trying to take us away from that. So our job is to control that impulse of going to the past or going to the future. And when you use that, and we control that impulse by concentrating and maintaining our object of meditation, whatever it may be. But in this case, the Anapana spot, your breath. And so if you catch yourself being distracted too many times, that is perfectly fine. That's exactly what you should be doing, is catching yourself. It's not about not thinking or not being distracted, but it's about knowing that you're thinking or knowing that you're being distracted. Right? People are always like, oh, I can't meditate, I can't stop thinking. I can't stop doing this. And I'm like, who told you to stop thinking? I didn't tell you to stop thinking. That's not the point of meditation. The point of meditation is not to stop thinking. The point of meditation is that you know that you're thinking. So that when thinking arises, you can catch that and observe it and acknowledge that thinking is happening, and you go back to your object of meditation. Because your mind is just trying to take you away from it's trying to distract you from your meditation session. And so as soon as you give it, if you give it that power to distract you, it's going to continue to distract you. But as long as you don't give it any power, you tell it, you acknowledge it, and you know it's there, and you make that mental label that a thought or distraction has arisen, then it's like, okay, you caught me, and it'll go away. It requires very little energy. And so labeling becomes very important when we are developing our practice, because labeling allows you to simply acknowledge what is happening, what has arisen, whether you hear sounds, whether it's a door opening, or you feel a certain sensation or feeling, or a distraction arises and you can't stop thinking about. Simply give it a one-word label and move on. Because if you don't label it, whatever distraction or sound or feeling or emotion you feel, your mind's going to run with it. Your mind wants to play and entertain with that distraction. So if we're sitting in meditation and a door opens, right, we're going to think, oh, who's at the door? Why are they late? Why are they disturbing my meditation? Who are they? What do they want? Right? We're going to play that movie in our mind. We're trying to make all these excuses for the door opening, when the only truth about the door opening is that the door opened and there was a sound. That's it. That's the only truth. Anything else that we add to that is false. It's a made-up story. They're excuses that our mind are trying to make to make sense of why the door opened. But we do that all the time. When we see an accident on the road, we're always asking ourselves, what happened? Who's involved? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? Right? If there's a fight happening, who started it? Why are they fighting? For what reason? Etc., etc. Right? We do that all the time. We make up stories to entertain the things that we see in life, just to make something up. But whatever we're making up, whatever we're thinking, whatever story we're creating, it's a false story. It's a false illusion. Right? There's no reality to that. We're just making excuses to the things that we see. Right? We're trying to justify what we see, or what we hear, what we experience. There's no need for that. Whereas the reality of things is sound, or door, accident, fighting, or anger, or hatred, whatever it is, right? Label it that one word, whatever comes up first, just give it that label and go away. It'll go away. So you don't have to create a story. We don't have to make excuses. We don't have to justify anything. It's not our problem. So when we're meditating or being mindful or being aware, right, just give things one label. Sound, dog, barking, rain, whatever it is. Don't give it a story. There's no need to. And the same thing in everyday life. When you're working, if you're cooking, you're cleaning, right? And if something happens, we give it that same label, one-word label as well. Okay. Yeah. I thought I was over-talking as usual, but I didn't. No. Just be aware that when the hindrances arise, because they will arise, to just be with them. So when we are starting the meditation or in the middle of it or we're deeply into the meditation practice, and one of the hindrances arises. We're not having that. Let's say pain arises, right? Because pain is inevitable when we're sitting, right? And that can be a hindrance as well, right? It can be ill will or aversion. So we're averse to the pain that we're feeling in our body as we're sitting, especially if we're sitting for a long period of time. In some practices, especially if you're practicing like mindfulness, just mindfulness meditation. When you practice mindfulness meditation, the way we practice mindfulness meditation is you sit and you focus on your breath, that's it. And then whatever happens, whatever arises, if you hear a sound or a feeling or emotion arises, you shift your object of meditation from your breath to whatever arose. And that becomes your object of meditation. So if you're sitting meditating on your breath and then you hear a dog bark, you shift your object of meditation from breathing to the sound of the dog barking until the dog bark stops and you go back to your object of meditation, which is your breath. If the door opens, you switch your attention to the door opening until the door stops or the sound stops and you go back to your breath. And you go back and forth, right? And so this is typically the general way of meditating, which I would kind of put it in the momentary concentration category. But when we're trying to focus on access concentration, and if a hindrance arises, we don't shift our attention to it until it becomes so overwhelming that it's interrupting or stopping our ability to sense the anapana spot. So sloth and torpor, or being tired, for instance, right? That's also one of the bigger hindrances. It's just like the feeling of being tired in meditation. And which is simply just lack of energy, right? Whereas restlessness is too much energy. But when we don't have enough energy, right, and we're kind of sleepy, we're drowsy, we just have sloth and torpor, that it can bring us in and out of full awareness of our breathing, right? Which is fine, but you want to stick to your object of meditation, which is the breath. The only time you want to switch to the full awareness of that sloth and torpor is if it gets so strong that you can't even sense, you can't even feel, you can't concentrate whatsoever on the anapana spot. At this point, you should already be sleeping, right? But a few seconds before that sleep actually comes in, that's when you want to shift your attention and be to that sloth and torpor and give it energy. Because it's simply what? Lack of energy. So if you give it the energy, give it the attention that it's wanting for a few minutes to kind of just energize it up a little bit, then it will naturally dissipate and you can go back to your object of meditation, the breath. But hopefully, it's still early in the day. We're still mostly awake. Hopefully everyone has coffee, so we don't have to worry about sloth and torpor. Maybe. But anyway, okay. I'm going to stop talking. But What are your questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, sir.
Besides joy and bliss, are there other benefits to that outside of meditation?
They would not arise outside of meditation. Because joy and bliss are both they're mentally induced. I mean, they could arise outside of meditation if you're doing something I take that back, probably not. Because anything we do outside of meditation that gives us joy and bliss is because of some externality, right? We're somewhere we enjoy. We're eating something that we like. We're drinking something that we like. We're talking to people that we like. We're intentionally putting ourselves in situations that are pleasurable for us. So these mentally induced joy and bliss cannot arise. Because there's a reason for it. There's a cause for it. Whereas joy and bliss in meditation, there is no cause. It just arises simply by the sheer enjoyment of the practice. Good question. You're making me think. I'm like, wait a minute, can it happen? I'm like, no, I don't think it can.
I guess I was thinking that I like to lose one instrument to get so focused on that everything else just kind of goes away. I guess that's more of that thought.
Blame the music. The music is giving you that joy. But that's also very good meditation in itself too. So anything that you do with one-pointedness can be meditation, right? We often think that meditation is simply sitting on the floor doing this, right? But really, meditation is what? Is one-pointedness, doing anything with one-pointedness. Cooking, if you're focused on the cooking, and only cooking, then we're going to make a pretty delicious, hopefully, meal, right? But if you're cooking and you're distracted and you're multitasking, doing this and doing that, you have the high potentiality of burning or ruining the dish, right? Same thing if you're ironing. If you're one-pointedness, you can have a perfectly ironed t-shirt. But you leave it to iron for 2 seconds too long and you're distracted, you're going to burn your shirt, right? And so anything you do with one-pointedness is meditation. When you're in the zone for anything, right, that can technically be meditation. Because you're focused only on that one task that you're doing. And so we have to take that same practice in the things that we do outside of meditation and bring it and hold it in the meditation practice as well. Playing music is an excellent way. Yes, sir.
So earlier you mentioned something about when you get into deeper states of meditation, some people see light. Do certain light colors represent different feelings, emotions, aspects, or is it just...
Not necessarily. There are... The lights that arise via nimitta, there's no representation or correlation to shape and size and color. It doesn't matter. However, in other practices, there are objects called kasinas, and these are visualization practices where you do use specific colors of light and discs. They call it discs, but different colors of light representing different elements and other things, right? But those are the ones where you're intentionally giving it a specific color or shape, right? So those have specific meanings. But the ones that arise as a nimitta, where it comes naturally, there is no significance to shape, color, or size. we also want to remember that when they do arise, hopefully it arises for you, that, again, you want to make sure that you're not giving it any attention, right? Because, again, it's going to be something that creates an excited feeling within us, right? We're excited to see it, so we automatically want to shift our attention to it. As soon as you do, it's going to disappear. It's like, oh no, you caught me. I'm going to go away. So just like when the piti arises in our body, a pleasurable feeling, when the nimitta arises, just be aware of it. Don't give it any attention. Just be aware that it's there and continue focusing on the Anapanasati. Only when it gets very strong and very bright, where it's almost taking over your entire visual field in your mind, at that point you can shift your attention to it and have that light as your object of meditation. Because that light will slowly take you into the jhanas. It's like a never mind. Don't give me any attention. Yes, sir.
So how does past sustained concentration into piti? I felt like I was switching it between piti and sukha a little bit. Feeling bliss, and then I hindered a lot of going back to joy. Is that kind of like trying to get the grounds in both? As soon as joy is felt, or as soon as bliss is felt, piti kind of subsides.
The only time where shifting between joy and bliss happens is if you experience joy, right, and it gets strong enough where you're able to access bliss. The only time it'll revert back to joy is if bliss weakens and it's not strong enough to maintain anymore. And then you go back down to joy. So there's only a switch. You're only switching between everything when something is weak and there's not enough concentration and it reverts back to the lower level, whatever it is. Otherwise, typically, it wouldn't be switching. But it's strong enough, it's going to stay there. Good question. Any other questions before we sit for 3 hours? Kidding. 30 minutes. Went through the list way quicker than I thought I would. So, we have 2 more classes before retreat. So the next class, I'll go over all 5 factors again. And then the last class, I'll go over the signs of being in access concentration, or the signs that will pop up to show you that you're near full access concentration. And hopefully that'll give us some idea and some encouragement for our retreat, which again is on December 9th. Mark your calendars. Okay. Well, there's no more questions. Feel free to stretch out, adjust yourselves for our sit. Welcome back. How's everyone's experience? Anyone enlightened yet? No? Almost? My only distraction today was our retreat schedule. To change some things around. Usually for the retreats, our longest sitting meditation session is 45 minutes. And we do like an intensive retreat, like once a year. It's a half day. And those sessions, the longest is an hour. But I think I'm going to have to add an hour to our regular retreat, at least for the first session. It's not that bad. This was 30 minutes, I think. Did anybody at least get past sustained any joyful feelings you felt today? Well then, I guess I'm fired. Or you're fired, I don't know. Very good point. A lot of times people want to skip ahead in meditation, right? They want to achieve jhana very quickly. And so we may sometimes force ourselves to want to feel the factors, or want to see the light, or feel the pleasurable feelings in the body or in the mind. And by doing that, by wanting or having that desire to want to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve, will create a false success, right? It's a false positive. So we have to sit in meditation, especially when you go on a retreat or on a long retreat. They always tell you that before you sit for any session, that you give yourself the intention of the meditation, right? So you have to make it's almost like a vow, right? So you make the intention that you're going to sit and focus on your object of meditation and just continue on without the desire for wanting certain things to arise, without desiring for achieving anything, or without the desire to realize anything. You're sitting to sit, right? To focus on your object of meditation. Because if you're sitting and you're wanting to try to see this light, right, then your mind is going to imagine it that it's there. This isn't the true nimitta light. This is just an imaginary light because you're wanting it, you're forcing it. You're trying to force yourself for it to be created, right? And a lot of times that what happens. A lot of people do that without realizing that this is an imaginary light and not a real light. But that's why we practice meditation. That's why we practice mindfulness. Because if you are aware of the thought process, if you're aware that you're trying to bring up that light, then your mind's going to create it on its own, right? So, but if your concentration is strong enough on your breath, or the nimitta spot, anapana spot, then there's no room for the imagination to do its thing. So if your concentration is strong enough, and only you will know how strong your concentration is, right? So if you know that your concentration is strong or getting stronger, then that nimitta light will naturally come on its own. It's a byproduct of strong concentration. But if you find yourself trying to meditate on the breath or the anapanasati, and you have distractions coming and going, and you're thinking, but you're bringing it back to your object of meditation, you're going, coming, like in momentary concentration, then there's room for the imagination to create something that's not real. Whether it's a pleasurable feeling in the body, whether it's a light, whether it's sound, or whatever it may be, right? So you will only know if the light is true or not true. And you can base it on how strong your concentration is. But we have to go into meditation with the intention of focusing on the anapanasati. That's it. That is your intention. My intention, I'm going to sit down, my intention is to focus and to develop strong concentration on the anapanasati. That is your little rule to yourself. That is your vow to yourself when you sit. So it's important to also make those intentions, especially if you're sitting for a longer period of time. And if it's imaginary, then most likely it won't if it's imaginary, it most likely won't develop or grow, right? Because you can imagine light, but when you imagine things, there's I guess it depends on how creative your imagination is. But generally speaking, if you're imagining something or you're making up in your mind, there's not a consistent growth, right? Like there's not a consistent growth. Instead, you'll see the light and it'll automatically go from this size to this size to this size, right? Versus smoothly expanding. When it's smoothly expanding, that's because of strong concentration. If it's an imaginary, then you're imagining light, and then you're imagining wanting it to be bigger, so it'll just automatically do this versus smoothly going out, right? Because you're telling your mind what to do. You're telling your mind to have light grow, and so it's going to grow in these chunks versus grow smoothly out. So that's another way you can recognize whether it's true nimitta or false nimitta. Good question. Any other last minute questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? I don't want to hear them, but if you have them, feel free to express them. Okay. Well, if not, then we will close this class. I'll see everyone in a couple of weeks, and hopefully everyone at the retreat. Thank you.